What I am here to talk about today is the new National Professional Qualification for SENCOs and how that looks from an international perspective. And the reason for that is because this autumn, schools across England will witness a pivotal shift in the Department for Education's approach into creating inclusive learning environments. And so this presentation delves into the challenges that drive this policy change. It will look at the DfE's intentions and their anticipated outcomes, the key strategies for developing truly inclusive schools, and then we're going to have a quick look at the comparison between the new National Professional Qualification for Special Educational Needs Coordinators and its predecessor, the National Award for Special Educational Needs Coordinators, and why that difference is important. And so by the end of the session, I'm hoping that you'll understand those key differences. You'll recognize how the SENCO role, the Special Educational Needs Coordinator, is evolving to meet the changing demands of schools. And you'll gain a little bit of insight into how this evolution impacts school leaders and the broader educational landscape. So I'm going to start off with a little bit about us. And when you're choosing a provider, I think it's important to consider the values and approaches through which they operate. We are here to get the very best leaders, no matter where they are in the world. It's really important to us. The MPQs support your professional learning through the program, and more importantly, ensuring that you leave the program even better leaders and you become the best educators for our children and schools wherever you are in the world. And we do that by inspiring your learning, working together, acting with integrity, and wanting the very best about improving our delivery and feedback. So the data on the side is an insight into the breadth and depth of the CPD that we provide. We are a large professional development provider, and we've been delivering MPQs since 2012 and have delivered that to over 20,000 people. I'm really proud to be here today to share with you this new development for the MPQ SENCO and its reformed iteration. So before I can start talking about MPQ SENCO, I need to sort of take a little step back and look at what national professional qualifications are. And so the context, what the DfE were setting out to achieve when they reformed the MPQs in 2020 was to offer a structured, high-status professional qualification that were linked to emerging career pathways in multi-academy trust and teaching school alliances. And these were based on things like teacher development and curriculum design roles, in addition to the more well-known National Professional Qualification for head teachers and for senior leaders, which had been around for a little bit longer. And this was all based on the teacher recruitment and retention strategy, which was trying to do it exactly what it says, to recruit more teachers, and once they were in, to make sure that they could be retained in that role for longer. Now, they did this to create this coherent suite of qualifications that can be invested in to provide enhanced development opportunities for schools. This was particularly focused at the time on serving disadvantaged communities where retention and recruitment were the biggest challenge. But I think now this was spread much more widely because that challenge around recruitment is uniform in all areas. And the way they've designed this pathway is to create a golden thread of professional development running from initial teacher training on the left of this infographic through to the early career framework as a foundation, and then into the MPQs for the fully qualified teacher, the experienced teacher, and into the school leaders. The new MPQs are more consistent in content They're externally moderated, and because of that, the engagement grew significantly. They are exceptionally well regarded, with very nearly 100% satisfaction ratings. And I think more importantly, we have feedback that the participants, about 98% of the participants, say that this has an impact in their schools, and that they feel more confident to move into leadership positions because of these qualifications. So moving on to some of the challenges, particularly around special educational needs. The current landscape for SEND in schools, so special educational needs and disabilities, is that there is an increasing diversity of needs. SENCOs need to address a wide range of learning differences and disabilities among students, and schools are telling us that they do that with limited budgets for any specialist support and for materials. They cannot deliver the same interventions that they have done previously. We also are being told that teachers don't feel confident in being able to deliver inclusive education practices. In addition to this, there are policy changes, so the SENCO needs to keep up with the evolving SEND regulations and best practices. And there's new evidence and research coming out all the time. And so just to put a few numbers to this, in England, there are around 9.1 million pupils in schools, and around, or more than, 1.6 million of those are identified as having a special educational need or a disability. That's 18%, and in the average state school classroom in England, that's between 5 and 6 pupils. Now, of those, there are about 430,000 who have educational healthcare plans. And so these are pupils who need more than just the normal interventions within a school. So it is now even more important for the SENCO to make sure that they are identifying which pupils they are within those classrooms and making sure that they are adequately supported. There are also collaboration challenges, working with parents, working with external specialists, and doing more and more with working and collaborating with school staff. And all of this leads to a significant challenge for the SENCOs themselves, because SENCOs often have to balance their administrative duties with direct support for students and staff. Now, these challenges aren't unique to English schools. We know that there are also challenges there for international schools. So I've pulled these numbers from some ISC research on inclusion in international schools from 2020. And actually, on this first slide, you'll see that only 39.3% of schools consider themselves to be well on their way in the journey towards inclusion, with policies and protocols and personnel, etc. Now, that represents a significant drop since 2017. 60% of schools recognise that the demographics are changing and they need to cater for students with learning differences, but are doing the best they can with limited resources. And so, for an example, there are a greater than an increase of more than 6% of schools are now suggesting that they have, schools are saying that there's more students coming in with a mental health or emotional conditions that require interventions. Around 55% of schools have expressed a need for training of learning support assistants, and highlighting that there is a particular gap in in-school professional development, and 67-ish% of schools say that they're using on-site training for their inclusion department. So when we bring up some more of these particular challenges, according to the same research, 57% of schools report that some teachers are skillful at differentiation, but many are still struggling. The significant point is here that this is a drop from the previous study where it was more schools than that thought most were skillful at differentiation. And so now they're sort of saying that some are. And 63% of schools want more specialist support and services, so training, consultancy, resources for inclusion. One of the other elements the report pulls out is the lack of common language and understanding of terms in special educational needs across international schools, and making some of those collaboration and standardization conversations more challenging. So the journey towards effective inclusion is ongoing, but there are some critical gaps that we need to address. If I scroll into the role of the SENCO then, the critical role of the SENCO is about driving inclusion, ensuring that every student's success in the school. And so part of their role is to identify and address the diverse needs of students with special educational needs or disabilities. And they're there to create an inclusive environment for academic and social growth. They develop and oversee individual education plans to support students so they can be and feel part of the lessons. They have a strategic impact on whole school inclusion, and they shape those whole school policies and practices that promote inclusion, and they have to collaborate with staff and embed those inclusive teaching methods across the whole school. And they now, more and more so, are providing that training and resources to empower the educators within a school. And this is much more becoming, it always was a leadership position, but this is even more so advocating for the SEN needs at all levels within the school, and doing more of that coordination with external agencies for that comprehensive support, and doing more around the monitoring and evaluating the inclusion strategies for continuous improvement across all of the teaching within a school. So this role of the SENCO then, as set out under the SEND and Alternative Provision Improvement Plan, has moved to a role with increased responsibility that is responsible for improvements in SEN provision and for student outcomes across the whole school. There is a shift from the teaching role of the SENCO into a more strategic leadership position. They now shape school policies and ensure compliance with legislation. They pursue and deliver ongoing training to meet the diverse SEN needs across the school. And they collaborate with those external agencies for comprehensive support. And so the role of the SENCOs is expanding and requiring ongoing development and leadership. So when a SENCO is in role, some of the particular strategies that they use for inclusive education is more about looking at a whole school approach. So they involve all staff in creating an inclusive culture. Because if we go back to those statistics where we're looking at 4, maybe 6 pupils in every class, then every teacher needs to be a teacher of SEND. And that SENCO role is about coordinating all of those teachers to make sure they're catering for every pupil within each class. They are around developing adaptive teaching. Now, I called this differentiated teaching a little bit earlier on, but actually we're now more commonly using the term adaptive teaching as it better describes the inclusive lesson rather than the student with a particular need doing a different piece of work or doing a differentiated piece of work that's separate to the rest of the class. So real quality first teaching and making sure that it really is an inclusive lesson. And collaboration has become a big part of the role. And now that's about engaging with parents right from the start of the process where you identify a particular need within a pupil. And then through the graduated approach. So the parents and the families are involved in all of the aspects of the planning and the assessment and the reviews. They also build relationships when they're bringing in professionals for effective support as well. Now, these personalized learning plans, or IEPs, as we also call them, individual education plans, need to be seen as part of the lesson plan for the whole class, not just a bolt-on. So we go back to the quality first teaching style to make sure that it is an inclusive lesson. And the role is now about continuous training for SEND practices for all of the staff and on how to deliver those inclusive lessons. Part of the strategy as well will be to look at how they can utilize tools and assistive technologies to enhance learning throughout the school and to support these needs. So why have the DfE decided to move to a national professional qualification? So the Department for Education have introduced this new qualification from autumn this year. So our first cohort will start in October, and this is superseded the NASENCO, or the National Award for Special Educational Needs Coordinators. And the reason for this is this new role has more of a leadership focus. The NPQ SENCO is based at a leadership level qualification, and that's to emphasize and develop the leadership aspects of the SENCO role. And there is a greater alignment with other professional qualifications. So the NPQ format is already used for other areas of teaching practice in school leadership. And so by bringing the SENCO qualification into this framework, it creates consistency across the professional development in education. It's also got a heavily evidence-based design, and they are using the very latest evidence to ensure that SENCOs are trained using the most up-to-date research and best practices that will have the greatest impact within lessons. The NPQs are also designed to be more flexible for SENCOs. So they can be completed around a professional's existing commitments, which make them more accessible and more practical for working SENCOs to obtain the qualification. And the NPQs are explicitly designed to deliver and improve outcomes for schools and young people. One of the other key aspects of the reform of NPQs is that they are much more standardized. And so by replacing NASENCO with MPQ, which is only delivered by 5 accredited DFE providers, this can mean that it's a much more standardized approach to SENCO training across the whole country, as MPQs have a set content framework and they are then delivered by these providers and externally moderated by a single external moderator. And so this MPQ format encourages ongoing learning and development, which aligns to the DFE goals of supporting teachers and leaders to develop expertise in specialist areas. So the MPQ SENCO is part of a broader strategy to enhance the quality of SEN provision in schools, and by focusing on leadership development and evidence-based practice and alignment with other professional qualifications in education. This change aims to ultimately improve outcomes for students with special educational needs and disabilities. So moving on, I thought I would just try and give you a little bit more about why the MPQ has been delivered instead of the SENCO, but to try and point out some of the key differences. So there is a more comprehensive curriculum which focuses on in-depth training on research policies and inclusive practices. Now, the SENCO was value but less comprehensive in the leadership and strategy areas. It was more academic and less strategic than the MPQ SENCO. And so there is this focus on the leadership development. And the MPQ SENCO, the modules are in there to look at leading change and improving outcomes, whereas the NASENCO qualification sort of looked more at the teacher level aspects of support, and it had a more limited, broader influence. There is also an alignment with the national standards. So these are closely aligned with the current national expectations. And it was considered that some of the previous NASENCO awards may have lacked some current relevance and maybe weren't as quite up to date with the new sort of evidence coming out from the latest research. Other key elements around this is it also has a significantly reduced guided learning hours. The recommended learning hours for NASENCO was around 500 hours, whereas the MPQ for SENCO has been reduced down to around 90-ish hours. The MPQ SENCO also has one summative assessment at the end rather than ongoing assessments throughout, with just smaller formative tasks now in practice. And so the other reason people are clearly picking the MPQ over NASENCO is that it now supersedes as the statutory requirement for English maintained schools. Any school who names a new SENCO, which is a mandatory position within a school in England, will have to make sure that they are trained in this qualification moving forward. So next, I'm just going to quickly give you an overview of how this looks in terms of how our training is planned. So all of the lead providers may have different roles in England, different ways of developing the MPQ in England. And what we offer in England is also the same as what we're delivering internationally. But you can see that our program is based on 4 cycles, and we deliver this over 18 months. It is a mixture of pathway planning at the very beginning, where you're regularly reviewing the learning through the leadership development record, and creating your own personalized golden thread that tracks and guides you through the entire program. We have performance coaching, which is there to provide valuable guidance and mentorship to enhance participants' performance and leadership capabilities, as well as to address specific needs and to foster continuous improvement. Many of our participants also say there's significant pastoral support as well from the coaches. They feel much more at ease having somebody that they can talk to within every cycle to make sure that they're doing okay. There is our synchronous training elements, which is about engaging participants through group sessions to facilitate those hands-on learning experiences, and online activities with customizable pathways, offering a variety of online activities with the flexibility to choose the pathways that align with those individual needs. We also have these smaller formative assessment tasks. Again, there's a choice of these tasks, and they are so the participant and their coach can assess the ongoing progress and development through the course and ultimately prepare them for the summative assessment at the end. We also offer online enrichment activities, and so we provide additional online webinars, for example, that enrich the overall learning experience, and these might be expert talks from renowned educational industry leaders. And we include ongoing peer discussion and reflection. We think to reflect on your own development is really important. And so we facilitate opportunities for participants to engage with each other and to discuss and talk about their experiences. And so in terms of the focus areas for the content, we have topics around inclusive pedagogy, identification of need, leading professional development, school culture, collaboration with staff, stakeholders and families, and data-driven decision-making. And what we expect our participants to come out with at the end of the session is to understand those evidence-based SEND strategies and practices. So the implementation is based on proven strategies that will have an impact, to have effective leadership in inclusive practices and policies, and to be able to promote collaboration and continuous improvement in SEND. So I'd just like you to pause for a minute before I finish, and I want you to consider what you can do to make your schools more inclusive. How do you look at these challenges that we've talked about at the start of the presentation, and what can you do to overcome those and to make sure that every child thrives? Secondly, I'd like you to consider who will lead this in your school. And I emphasize the word lead in that sentence, because this is really about who have you got with the leadership skills as well as the knowledge to be able to deliver this change. And finally, what support then do they need? Do they need help in the sort of leadership strategies, in how to deliver professional development? Do they need help with long-term plans and goals? And so I'd like you to think about that as you consider what sort of development might be right for them. And I'm just going to finish on one last slide. So obviously, this course is rolling out from August, so I'm not able to put a quote in for our MPQ SENCO participants. So instead, I've put in a quote from an MPQ EL, which is our Executive Leaders course, who said that this is some of the best CPD they've ever done. Research informed and research relevant. Outstanding coaching, both one-to-one and in groups. And I think that first part is really important. It's really emphasizing the fact that we've used the research to make sure that this is a meticulously designed program that will equip SENCOs with the necessary skills and knowledge to lead inclusive education effectively. And so by focusing on the key areas and addressing the evolving demands of SEND leadership, the course prepares the SENCOs to make a significant impact on student success and school culture. This is far more than a course on a particular special educational need or how to work with a particular student. This is a course on leadership in special educational needs, so they can equip the whole school and make that move towards a more inclusive education for those students. Thank you ever so much for your time. I'd love to hear if you've got any questions, and if any of you are interested, our MPQ for SENCO is still recruiting, although we are running out of places. So please do get your applications in the next, I think, 2 weeks before our deadline runs out.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Will, for presenting. We're now going to start with the Q&A. So for our attendees, if you do have any questions, then please do type them into the chat. The first question I have is, could you just remind us when this starts and also what is the cost?
Okay, thank you. So the program will start in October, towards the end of October. The cost is £1,705 plus VAT if you're self-funding. If you're not self-funding, there might not be a VAT implication to that. Yeah, so applications in as soon as possible to make sure you can get space.
Okay, and you mentioned there are face-to-face sessions. How would this work for like international students? Here we've got an attendee from Abu Dhabi.
Okay, so some of our delivery partners are able to deliver this in a face-to-face. Otherwise, we have an online program where they can actually join and interact with our online courses. These are exactly the same courses, so we don't differ the content, but they are still able to interact with participants through chat rooms and through breakout rooms and that kind of thing. So it's the same content, but in some cases where it's too far for you to travel to a face-to-face, we can deliver it like that. That particular one, I think we might have some face-to-face courses, so it's definitely one to get in touch with us and ask where we are delivering them.
Okay, thank you. And will this be recognized internationally? Does it also replace the SENCO?
You will have to check with your particular areas in your particular governance around that. So at the moment, what this is a English DFE regarded element, and it's worth just double checking in your own areas. Yeah, it's different across different places. Some people are accepting it, and others, it's such a new one, they might well do later, I should think.
Okay, thank you. And how many places are there on the course?
So we are expecting to see a significant number of people coming in and doing this course with us. We've already got 1,400 people signed up for the September start. That's within England and internationally. So what we're doing is just creating more groups where we've got a bigger interest at the moment. We do have a limit to that, but potentially in our international areas, we're expecting in the hundreds in terms of people doing the course.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question here. Is there any room for payment by installment?
Possibly, that's worth one getting in touch with us with. It would depend on it would depend on who the delivery partner is, who the schools are, but please get in touch. We might be able to help out with that.
And also you mentioned the course starts in October. Will there be another course starting later on?
So our next cohort will start towards the end of April. So they're running about 6 months in between each.
Okay, thank you. And is the price the same for international students?
That price I've quoted you is for international students. In England, there are still some scholarships available, and well, there were some scholarships available. But yeah, so it's different pricing.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, if we cannot afford the course, would there be room for mentoring with experts?
That's not something we've looked into yet. So I'm presuming the person that's asking that would be looking for just a coaching sort of aspect without the full course content. That's not something we currently deliver, although it is possibly something we might look at in future years, but isn't available yet.
Okay, fantastic. We just got a question about the link to register. I don't know if you're able to access it, Will, but it's on the best practice network webpage with NPQ for SENCOs. So I imagine that is the correct link that people are sharing on the chat.
It should be. I'm hoping. I'm hoping so. Yeah. If not, just have a double check. It's the international one rather than the domestic NPQ for SENCO. And so across the top, there should go to the international tab. I can't see it at the moment, unfortunately. Yeah, I will share the. There you go. Perfect. I've got 2 people that I think have beat me to it and have been able to put in the correct tab.
Fantastic. Another question that's come in. Will this be recognized in COBIS schools worldwide?
I'm not sure of the answer for that. I think that's something that COBIS will have to make a decision on, and so that's up to you guys.
Yeah, I'll chat to my bosses. Okay, fantastic. And do you have a general takeaway message for all our attendees?
I think obviously these changes are happening, and I think the takeaway message is the role of the SENCO has been changing for years. And what this new qualification does is it understands that, and it has evolved with the role as well. So it's becoming much more of a strategic position, and it's recognizing the hard work that SENCOs have been doing, and hopefully supporting them more through the training program.
Okay, excellent. Well, that was our last question. So again, a big thank you to Will for presenting. This webinar has been recorded, and recording will be emailed to all registrants afterwards. Our next webinar will be on strengthening early years practice, which will be delivered by Early Excellence next Wednesday. And you can register for this session now on our website. So thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you all again for another COBIS webinar. Thank you. Thank you, Will. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.